Hi, everyone. It's just me at the moment. Krystal will be coming shortly. She is just finishing up another live video. She's doing one with some other authors in Paris. So she will jump in as soon as she gets done with that. And it's been a busy day. It's been a busy day being on camera all day. We started it with a live walk through Montmartre. So that was really fun. Bonjour, Phyllis. Krystal's coming. It's just not me. Krystal will be here too pretty soon. She's just finishing up with another video. Hey, Rox. I know, Roxanne. I know her. I call her Rox. How are you ladies today? It's just me all by my lonesome at the moment. But Krystal will be here soon. And we will talk about Notre Dame de Paris. I had a really hard time, actually, this time doing the questions because there's so much about Notre Dame that I absolutely love and want to share. But I thought some of it might be a little too hard. But I picked some good things. Hey, Cheryl, Ellen, Kathy. Yeah, the Montmartre walk was really fun. How fantastic was it to walk into Sacré-Cœur? That was just beyond amazing to be able to go inside there. I wasn't sure. I thought we'd lose a signal, but to go into Sacré-Cœur and then the nuns started singing and it was quiet. It was absolutely beautiful. I definitely got a little choked up myself. So it was what an amazing chance to get to see that and to hear that when we're so far away from it. So yeah, the nuns, it was pretty fantastic. Gorgeous. So today was our second live walk in Paris, and we're going to do it every single Sunday morning, 7 a.m. Pacific, which is 10 a.m. Eastern time, I believe. So next week, we already have it figured out. We're going to go down towards Saint-Georges, which is below Montmartre. So that's there's a lot of really great stuff to see down there too. So, hey, Carrie. So many of you I already saw this morning. I love it. Thanks so much for coming again. So I guess we could kind of go ahead and get started. Did people study up? Did you study up on your Notre Dame information? Carrie's all ready with her Louis. There might be something in here that has to do with Louis. So a Louis, I should say. But yeah, Notre Dame is definitely one I was excited to share. It needs its very own. It can't be sandwiched with the other one. Cheryl, 9 a.m. It's 7 a.m. for me. I wake up very early. I actually was awake at 4 a.m. this morning because I had a dream that I missed our live walk, and that was kind of frightening. So I woke up very early, but we're trying to figure out the tech issues on it. We are going to do it through Zoom, which seems to work. And so I think we're going to try to we'll do them on Zoom and then also record them. So it's only $8.99 to purchase the walk, and it helps support us. And quite a bit of work actually goes into constructing it and doing all the research. So it's a really great way to help support us and what we're doing. But you could also purchase it, and then we could send you the video afterwards. So I think that should work pretty well. So we could go ahead and get started. Cheryl, you're just so busy, but yeah, so we'll figure it out. We'll do it. So we talked right afterwards, and we have some ideas of some other things to do it. So I think we'll have it all figured out. So you could, even if you miss it, you could purchase it and watch it later. I don't know if we actually were able to record today's. So getting to see inside Sacré-Cœur, but Krystal and I'll talk about it and figure it out afterwards. So, all right, who's ready for some Notre Dame de Paris? So I had to get all my tech issues set up. I have 2 laptops. I have my iPad for some photos because I'm waiting for my partner in crime, Krystal, to join us, which she will soon if you missed that at the beginning. So we'll get started. So the first question is, this bishop was behind building and envisioning the cathedral itself. So you have to think very far back. I could give you a little clue. Hi, Sherry. He shares his name with a wing of the Louvre. So we're going to put two of my favorite things together. This wing wasn't named after him, but it's the same name. So you could throw out your answers. Hey, June. So glad to see everybody here this morning in this busy month of December. Hey, Catherine. Oh, Carrie, that's a good one. That's a very good one. You did do some studying up. He was the one. It was all kind of this guy's idea. And the they still do not know now, after all this time, who the first 4 architects of Notre Dame was. So we don't really even know who an actual architect was of Notre Dame when it first was imagined. Richelieu, Sully. You guys are getting some good ones in there. Because Richelieu was a cardinal, so that's a very good guess. I had to say Richelieu about 100 times before I got it right. My French fireman kept telling me how to say it, and then I couldn't say it right. And then after I finally got it. Denon. So the answer is actually Sully. So it was Maurice de Sully. So you guys, you were very good. Richelieu is a pretty easy one to think, since he was a cardinal too. But it was in fact Maurice de Sully. He was the Bishop of Paris. He was named that on October 12th, 1160. So a very long time ago. And from that very moment, he basically dreamed of wanting to have having a major cathedral in Paris. So when he went from the second on that October 12th that he basically envisioned this, within 3 years, they started building it in 1163. So it started being built. It was a lot of his personal money he used to have it constructed. But at the time, the clergy and the church was basically the richest organization you could have. And they actually, that whole area where Notre Dame is and all the way over into the left bank, they owned basically 70% of that was owned by the church. So they were extremely wealthy and had a lot of money at that time. So envisioning this grand cathedral that would be kind of the beacon for everybody was decided by Mr. Sully. So we have him to thank for that beautiful cathedral in 1160. I mean, it's crazy how long ago that was. All right, question number 2. This artist's older brother was blown away by a song, and he was converted to Christianity. When he heard this song, he had a younger sister, and she was a artist. And I don't want to give too much more away. She was a sculptor, we could say that. But it was her brother that had come into Notre Dame on actually Christmas Day and heard the choir singing and was so blown away by it, he decided to give himself up to the church, devote himself to the church. Any guesses? His sister was a sculptor. If that helps you a little bit. Everybody's thinking hard. This we did a podcast about her. And I would actually say now I can't stand her brother. I think he's a jerk. Which I'll tell you why when we get to the answer. Did I give away to Claudine's brother? Oh, I don't have a brother, but close. It is kind of, it's hard for me to type Claude or Claudel because just naturally think of just spelling it out. I like it, Jennifer. So yes, you guys are so great. It was in fact the brother of Camille Claudel. His name was Paul Clamel. As I said, if you listen to the podcast and you know anything about her history, he's a gigantic jerk. But on Christmas Day, 1886, he came into the church. He was just 18 years old. He went to the cathedral because he was actually trying to just find a spot for some inspiration. He was a writer. He had kind of a strange relationship with his father, and so he had decided to go sit in the cathedral and just have a moment, and to write and to think and get to inspired. And so he walked in there, and when he walked in, the choir was singing, and it was Christmas Day. For the choir of Saint Nicholas de Chardonnay, began singing "Magnificent," and he was so blown away by it that he basically, in that moment, just kind of fell to his knees and just decided that he was going to devote himself to the church. So I have a picture I got to get here for you. So he, at that moment, was just like changed his entire life. They dedicated a spot in the floor. So where he was standing, and I hope all of you have been inside of Notre Dame. If you go into Notre Dame and you stay on the south side, which is kind of the natural flow when you enter the church, where in the south transept, which is the very center of the church, which is right under, which now sadly has the big hole in the ceiling. There is the marble tiles, the black and white marble tiles on the floor. It's it's near where the statue of Joan of Arc is, but they had changed over and put in one of the marble. They marked it at the spot where he was standing on Christmas Day, 1886. So now, if you know the story of Camille, she, had, of course, she was the lover and the muse of Rodin. But then later, after her father died, like literally minutes after her father died, her brother and mother basically didn't tell her that her father had died because she was actually really close, and he was actually the only person that actually supported Camille, and they didn't tell her he had died, and they basically took her and shoved her into a hospital. And then she was later taken from the hospital into an insane asylum where she spent the rest of her life, which was 30 years. When she begged and begged to be let out, Rodin tried to get involved in it. There was actually an author that wrote a article that actually said she shouldn't be there. They talked to the doctors. The doctors were saying she shouldn't be here. She needs to go home. But jerky little Paul decided to keep her there, and she died there alone with the other patients after 30 years. They wouldn't come to, no family came when she died, and she was basically put into a small grave. After a period of time when they didn't come collect her, she was dug up and she was thrown into a mass grave, and that is where she basically stayed. Her, I think it's her grand niece, Paul Claudel's granddaughter, I believe it is the one who's kind of thankfully taken over to share everything she did. They destroyed a lot of her art. They destroyed a lot of her molds. So over time, so much has been lost. But her grand niece has taken over and tried to save that. There's a museum just outside of Paris dedicated to her. So it's a very tragic story. Yes, that movie, Jennifer, is really disturbing. I watched it not a few months ago, and I actually had to stop it at one point and take a break because it's so sad. And she was such a beautiful and amazing artist that that's how she ended up, her life ended up, and it's very sad. So that is why we've decided that Paul is a jerk. And that was a long tangent outside of Notre Dame. So, all right, question number 3. This ruler asked architect Viollet-le-Duc many times to transform the cathedral into a grand stage for his events. So it was a leader of France. This was all done in the 19th century. So that might help you narrow it down a little bit. But he actually, against poor Viollet-le-Duc, he was a little busy at the time trying to restore the cathedral. And this ruler kept asking him to stop everything and to fancy up the joint for his big events. So who do you think it is? Napoleon Bonaparte. Very, very good guesses. There's so many events that happened in there, and it's pretty amazing. I have had from the very first time, I don't even think before I went in there, because my grandfather took some beautiful pictures of Notre Dame. I've always loved it. So when I finally got there to go see it the first time, it was pretty special, pretty amazing. And it's just continued. I'll share some of my favorite little things. I have a favorite little thing that actually belonged to my great aunt that they got at Notre Dame. So they're all pretty right. It was actually Napoleon III. So Napoleon III was the one who helped spearhead Viollet-le-Duc to be able to start restoring it. He had decorated the cathedral for his wedding to Eugenie, and he wanted it. Napoleon III told Viollet that he wanted it to be just as grand as his uncle's coronation, which was, of course, captured in that amazing painting by Jacques-Louis David. And so he said he wanted it to be just as beautiful and grand as that. So, poor Viollet is trying to do his best to do everything he can to restore. Over time, somebody at one point thought it would be a good idea to clean the walls with basically like a power washer, a 19th century power washer, and destroyed much of the painting that was on it. And I have some pictures of some of what some of those walls look like. But he had asked him, he said, "Oh, I want you to make it just as grand as my uncle's coronation." So for their wedding in January 1853, he did it, or in the early fall, it was in January, when they had a child in January 1853. He was asked to do it again. He told him, he was like, "Remember what you did last time, Viollet? Why would I need you to do it again?" So he had to do it for their son, the Prince Imperial Louis Napoleon. And so poor Viollet had to stop everything yet again. At the time, the walls, even in the painting, if you saw the last live stream we did 2 weeks ago, for the painting that Jacques-Louis David did, that's, they had to cover the walls with great big, huge pieces of velvet and fabric. And they put, wood up to cover things, because the inside of the church looked horrible at the time. It had just fallen in disrepair for so long. So he ended up having to do all this, and poor Viollet, while he was in the middle of everything, had to drop it yet again so he could do this for Napoleon. Yes, Ellen, Napoleon Bonaparte, of course, we all know about his big ego, but Napoleon III wasn't that far off either. So he definitely, but I guess, when you're the emperor, the king, I guess that's kind of, I guess, a perk of the job, right? I don't think that's things, So I don't think those are things you could probably do as much this nowadays. So, all right. So the next question, I talk much more when Krystal's not here. Me is probably not okay. So these large paintings were presented to the church every year by the Goldsmith Guild of Paris. And they were done by some of the greatest painters. Do you know what they are called? And thankfully, they have all been saved. So there's, if you've spent time in there, in all of the side chapels, many of them have very big paintings in them. And they were all given by the Goldsmith Guild of Paris. And it started quite a long time ago. It started originally in the 14th century. Then it went into the 17th century is when the paintings were done. So what are these called? They were always given on one specific day of the year, which kind of helps with their name. But luckily they were, because they were in the side chapels, they were saved from any damage at all during the fire. And a little trick, if you are a close follower of my Instagram over the years, I usually I've talked a lot about Notre Dame. So some of the things we talk about, I have talked about in my Instagram post. So you could always study up until I put them all in a book. Then it'll be even easier. So Cheryl and Carrie, you guys are so smart. They were called the Mays. They were, as I said, from the Goldsmith Guild of Paris. They were given to Notre Dame. It started in the 14th and 15th century, and it would actually just be a gift, like a decorated tree that they would put on the altar. But then in the 17th century, they decided to do very large paintings. So they had these huge paintings done. They were all with, obviously, religious themes, and a lot of them were the stories of the apostles. They every May 1st, one was given to the church. When it arrived, it was hung on the main pillar in the choir, and for everybody to come and visit it and to see these new paintings. These paintings were done by everyone from Charles Lebrun to Lesueur to just anybody at that time. I mean, the greatest painters of that time. Long before you could go to a museum, Notre Dame was basically the very first museum in France, because that is where, as we said, the church had a lot of money. They were given all these gifts as well. So a lot of the art and the very first museum in France was Notre Dame. So you could go there and see them. Over time, they were done from 1630 to 1707. There was 2 years in there that they did not do paintings. But of those, there's 76 of them that still remain. Some have been damaged over time, but 76 of them still remain to this day. A few of them are in the Louvre. The ones that were in Notre Dame were all saved and rescued and are probably getting a much needed cleaning that they haven't had for a very long time, even before the fire. And eventually, they said by 2024, which seems so far away, they will be on display in the Louvre until Notre Dame can open again. And I have a few photos of them. There is, you see that very well? There's one of them. They're all kind of, some of them are kind of hard to see, even in the church. So, but they're pretty huge. They're stunning paintings. The ones that there is a few in the Louvre. This is one, and that is one that is actually in the Louvre. So you could go visit those today. They're pretty huge. They're pretty big paintings. So yes, Catherine, I know we all want to go back inside. Okay, next question. These kings suffered a crime of mistaken identity. So these kings are on the church. Krystal's about to jump in, hopefully. These kings on the church were sadly thought to be something else. Yes, I know, Ellen. If anything that's red, I'm just drawn to it like a beacon. But yeah, I love the red and the blue, especially back then. Did you know the blue was the most expensive color of paint to make because it was made from, I think it was jewels. I think it was from lapis lazuli. So when you see those really old paintings from like there's a beautiful one of Marie de Medicis in the Louvre in her huge coronation gown, and it's covered with like fleur-de-lis and everything else on it. Oh, there's Krystal. It's one of the most expensive. It was showing how rich they were because they were able to use the color blue. Welcome.
Hey guys, sorry I'm late. It's so good to see such a big group. We got 21 people in here. Of course, Claudine.
Well, but I went on a whole tangent for about 10 of those minutes about Camille Claudel.
It's important that we go through the tangent. How are we doing? Are we getting the answers right? We always have a smart group.
Yeah, they're so smart. Right now, we're on question number 5, which, I think if I'm left to my own devices, I just take longer. The king suffered a crime of mistaken identity.
Who was it? Guys, Claudine, she works really hard on these questions. I'm like, make it true or false. But I like how she makes it tough on you guys. It's tough love, right?
It's usually mostly because there's a certain stories I love to share with people. So that's kind of where the questions kind of come from too.
Yeah, they get excited through your excitement. Look at that, Carrie.
Kathy. Yeah, so that is true. You guys are correct. It was the kings of Judah that are across the front of the church. Here is a lovely picture of them. I also have they are all those little guys that go all the way across the church. On October 23rd, 1793, ropes were actually tied to their necks and they were yanked off of the church because the revolutionists thought they were actually represented the kings of France, not the kings of Judah. So they were pulled down and there was a stone cutter there and chopped off their heads. And for 3 years, they were left in this pile on the Parvis, just in front of Notre Dame for 3 years. There was a bunch of other things in there. There was other statuette that came off the church, everything else. After a while, after 3 years, I guess the neighbors complained because it got really smelly and really messy, and they told them to get rid of it. So the city ended up selling the pile of stones to contractors. And a lawyer named Jean-Baptiste Lacalle was building a home over at 10 Rue de la Chasse d'Atin. And the contractor showed up one day with his, a truck, wheelbarrow, whatever it was at that time, comes over and has this huge stack of stones, pops them in the yard. Well, Jean-Baptiste sees this and he starts looking at it and thinks there's something wrong here. They're not shaped like squares. They're shaped like people. And so he started looking at him. He said, wait, I think I know what these are. He was a very devout Catholic. There is a rule that if you had found something like that, you're supposed to bury it. So that is why one of the oldest statues in Saint-Germain-des-Prés, they ended up finding also in somebody's yard because it was discarded. And then you were supposed to bury it. That's what you're supposed to do. So he took these, there's 21 of the 28 heads of the kings. He ended up digging a hole, putting it into his backyard, covering it up, putting a wall on it. It was much later in 1977 when a bank purchased the location and found them in there. And because they were purchased, the stones were purchased from the church. There was nothing, they were the rightful owner of it. That the bank figured out, they kind of had an idea what they had and somebody looked into it, ended up giving them back to Notre Dame. Today, they're all in the Musée de Cluny, which is still closed right now for renovations, but you could see them all there now on display. So
yes, they survived.
That's all of their little decapitated heads.
That's pretty good for sitting in the dirt for so long.
Yeah. Oh, this poor guy.
Yeah.
He lost more than just that. But yeah, it's pretty fascinating. You could go there and see them now. But yeah, it was the 28 kings of Judah, and each one has, and this is how much I love Notre Dame, and this is probably going to make me a complete and total nerd. But I have these printouts that I've done, and I've actually gone through and named who each one of them are. So they were all redesigned and put back up. So they were all recreated from the original sketches. And part of the bodies were there too. Yeah. And some of the bodies are actually also in the Cluny, but there wasn't as many because I think the contractor probably didn't he didn't purchase all of it.
Yeah. No, the Cluny Museum, Cheryl's right. It's a really great museum. I think a lot of people miss that. It's not like on the hot spot list.
Yeah. It's not very far from Notre Dame either. It's probably like a 5-minute walk. It's very close.
Yep.
Yeah. Do you want to read the next question or should I? Do you have them?
Sure. Yeah. So the stories told through these were for spreading the word to those that couldn't read. So, back in the day, a lot of people couldn't read. They were read to. So these were designed to tell biblical stories that anybody could just look at and know the story. Does anybody have a guess about that? These were used to tell stories, to spread the word for those who couldn't read. When did people really start learning to read?
I don't know, but I don't think, it was definitely not in the 12th century.
Yeah, it's crazy. It took so long. You guys are correct. Ellen, Kathy, and Cheryl. It was stained glass windows.
It was a stained glass windows. And yes, so if you go into, of course, like the chapelle, you could go in there and it tells the whole story of the Bible, starting from one side all the way around. So they use that in the stained glass windows. They also did it in the doors. Pretty much all the statuette and everything that's on churches was basically a way to teach the story to people because they couldn't read. So that's what I after the first couple of times I went to Notre Dame, I came back and was like, I want to learn what every single statue and everything means on the doors, on the walls, on everything. I ended up taking a online class through Yale. And then I went and printed all these large photos and actually wrote all over them exactly who it is and what the story means and which level is which. And it was pretty cool. Then the next time I went to Paris, I took this with me and stood in front of it, and people kept walking by me like I was a weirdo, but I didn't care.
Oh, that's amazing. I'd be more worried about someone pickpocketing you while you're examining.
Yes, and the Stations of the Cross as well. Yeah, some of those in the churches are very, very designed and very elaborate. Beautiful.
Nice. All right, guys. Next question. I think I'm going to slaughter the name of this person. Viollet-le-Duc.
Yes.
His original plans called for 2 of these. So Viollet-le-Duc, his original plans called for 2 of these. So what was in the original plans? There were 2 of them. Any ideas, guys?
There's 2 of these things.
2 of these things in the original plans for Notre Dame.
Yes, Carrie, you're so correct. Notre Dame, if you go in there right before Easter, when they don't light any of the candles or any of the lights, if you go there certain times of day, it can be very dark. But if you go into like, oh my gosh, what am I thinking of? The one there by Saint-Eustache, it's so bright. there's so much light in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I always like when they clean the insides, like when they clean the, because all the soot gets built up on the walls and everything. Yeah. All right, guys, these are some good guesses. Amanda says steeples. Kathy says spire. Do we have any other guesses? We have such a smart group. These guys, there's some competition for you here, Claudine.
I know. Somebody's going to take over my job.
No one can do it as well as you. Must be spires. So Cheryl, you ladies are correct. It was spires. 2 spires.
It was spires. And I actually, when I read that in this one book that was actually written in French, I was like, oh my God, that's so cool. Because now, especially with everything with the spire, the original spire was created in 1250. It was damaged so many times by the wind and the weather that they ended up taking it down because they were worried it would, fall and destroy something. So when Viollet-le-Duc presented his plan of what he wanted to do to the cathedral, he actually suggested they put 2 spires on the top of it. But as we know, they only did one. But we'll talk a little bit in another question about that spire too.
All right, guys, good guesses. Moving on. This is the oldest door on the facade of Notre Dame. So does anyone, if you can name the oldest door, I'll be really proud of you guys. So, I mean, the whole thing is so old. How do you tell which door is older than the other? But do you guys know the oldest door on Notre Dame's facade? Claudine, did you know this? Or are you just like, I know this, you know, just walking around Notre Dame and after your little Yale course?
I'm like, that's the oldest.
Still, but the writing.
Clearly, it looks the oldest.
Stained glass. The stained glass survived the fire, correct?
Yep.
That's great.
It did. All of the stained glass that they took out was at the upper level that went around all the way around. They took all those out. There was some damage to some of them. A few of them had cracks, but the great thing is they were so dirty and covered with so much dust that the dust protected the lead dust that went on top of it.
Crazy. I would think they would take like every 10 years and like clean them or something like that. But
I don't know how long ago they had cleaned them, but you know, out of sight, out of mind. They're just up there.
Yeah. I'll tell that to my husband when I don't want to dust. I'm like, stay home from fire.
From the lead that's going to come down.
It's an old building. There's probably lots of lead.
Yeah.
All right, guys. So does anyone know the oldest door? This is a pretty tough question. Maybe we can give them a clue, Claudine. It's related to a saint.
Well, there's 3 doors across the front. It's in the front. So there's the one dedicated to the Virgin Mary. There's the one that's dedicated to the Last Judgment. And then there's the one that's dedicated to St. Anne. So one of those.
ABC, guys. What do we think? Or is there a D? Roxanne says St. Anne. Kathy says the door to the crypt. Kathy, that would be my guess too. I'm like, crypt door's got to be old. Yeah. The one nearest to the choir. I like that, Carrie. Not a bad guess.
There's side doors as well that all each have their own story as well, of course, that I got really excited about. I wasn't raised Catholic. I don't know
where this comes from.
Yeah. So I go in there and I'm like, I want to know every single thing that's on here.
I mean, it's just the history. Things are so much more interesting when you know why.
Yeah. And there's like, sometimes there's hidden things in some of them, or there's some really interesting things. So.
You guys are smart. So Roxanne and Cheryl are correct.
It was the St. Anne, which is on the right. It's the door that everybody enters when you go to visit the cathedral. It is originally it was parts of it were from the St. Etienne Church that stood there way before Notre Dame was built. So, you know, those it goes back to, you know, 1000. So they're very old. Of course, here's my lovely diagram.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, but St. Anne, it tells the story of St. Anne and Joachim, I believe it's how you say his name, and how, they wanted to have a child and they couldn't. And then they were told that they were going to have this, blessed child, and that was Mary. And so it tells the whole story. You could read it all the way across. Each one of these things means something different. So we won't go into all of that now. But then even like up here, there's statues up here that tell stories. So it's a lot of fun stuff to learn.
Of course, that sounds fun.
Yeah.
Well, you got diagrams, makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, guys, next question. This was once sitting atop the spire, and it held some of the greatest relics of France. So this thing was sitting on top of the spire, and it was holding some of the greatest relics of France. I love this. So they just stuck all these like finger bones in this thing and put it on the roof, and they were like, here you go.
Sort of. I love that you always think every relic's just a finger bone.
I'm like, it's a finger bone. I think it's just like ingrained in my brain because I remember going to Notre Dame for the first time, one of these churches, and it's like, there is a Jeanne d'Arc's finger bone. And I'm like, what? they put her finger in a box like that. Just
Yeah, they'll have like at Saint Etienne du Mont, they have like a little vial, and I think it's a part of Saint Genevieve's finger.
just like people's body parts in boxes. Freaks me out. We got a smart group here.
You guys are so good.
Right, Le Coq, the rooster.
It was the rooster when the night of the fire, and when the spire fell. That was my horrible feeling, was that was lost forever. I had written about the rooster and what had been inside of it quite a while, before this. And it was funny, it never really got a lot of people that interested. It never, I never got people like, that was a great story, or that's so neat. But so when it fell, I was just like, holding my breath and thinking it was going to just be burned and gone. But thankfully they found it. It was originally created by Adolphe Victor Geoffroy Duchamp Couvert.
That's a mouthful.
Yeah, he had created this rooster, and they placed it up there in 1859. When the spire was completed after Villette-le-Duc. In 1935, it was taken down to be regilded, and the Archbishop of Paris at that time decided that they needed to put these relics in there. So there is a relic of Saint-Denis, there's a relic of Saint-Geneviève, and then there is a piece of the thorn from the crown of thorns. It's so inside.
It was all still there, just
Yep. And I think it was a day or two after the fire, there was a picture of the architect now, who's the main architect, Philippe, who I think I just have a mad crush on him because of what his job is. But he ended up, there was a picture of him holding it. They found it they had found it. And they put it on display last year at the Patrimoine Days. So I was able to go up. You wouldn't have ever had this chance to see it up this close. But he's a little dented up.
That's cool. He's big.
I was pretty excited. Yeah, he's probably, pretty big. I was pretty excited to get to see it up close. They did take the relics out and they put them away someplace safe. So they'll put them back in someday, hopefully.
Finger bones will return.
Finger bones, yes.
Good guesses, guys. All right, next question. They say the devil is in the details. This could be very true for this feature of the church. So what part of Notre Dame would you guys say has the most details? The devil is in the details. It would be devilish details as well. Any guesses?
It is, and the devil could have been involved in it.
Ooh, drama.
And his finger is in the rooster. No, just kidding.
I would expect nothing less.
No, it's not.
For that guy, Cheryl has a big crush on him too, Claudine. You guys are going to have to.
Oh, I know. I just love him.
I'm sure, both of you would be too much for him. He couldn't handle all the smart and beauty. Cheryl and Claudine.
He's basically the Villette-le-Duc of today, and he gets to go to all of these monuments and restore all these things in France. I just want to follow him around for a day.
He's the Dauphine of architecture.
Mm-hmm.
The last judgment portal. Carrie, you are so smart. How was Carrie so smart? Did she take that?
Teacher.
Well, this is why. This explains everything. We appreciate you. Teachers do not get enough credit. They are some of the hardest working people besides moms, of course. Respect.
Yeah, especially now.
I'm right with you, Catherine. I don't know any of the answers. I love Claudine. She's very smart. It is true. It was the door of the last judgment.
Yeah. So this is a pretty fascinating story. So in the 13th century, a locksmith named Biscornet was asked he kept bragging about how he had this new fancy way of creating locks and hinges. And so he kept bragging about how he could, do this and he could do it really quickly. So of course the builders said, okay, sure, let's, go ahead and do this. Well, Biscornet took on something a little bit too big of a task. And when he realized exactly what he needed to do, if you remember, I have a photo of the doors of Notre Dame. It's not just a simple, rectangle hinge that you put on the door. So he, one day he was a little overwhelmed, and one of his helpers came to check on him and found him on the floor asleep in front of the door, one of the doors, and was shocked to see it was done. It had only been a few days. So the thought is that it's believed by a lot of people and a lot of historians that he actually sold his soul to the devil in order to have them created. So the idea is basically the devil helped him, and the devil had completed these doors for him. When they were installed and they were inaugurated, they couldn't get them open until a priest came by and poured some holy water on the hinges, and the doors opened. So you be the judge.
I'm a believer in all things weird. So
these, and everybody has walked by these, everybody has seen. I mean, these doors are absolutely stunning. I mean, it's covered with ironwork that twirls, and there's like, sometimes you'll see a little animal, and there's flowers. They're just, it'd be amazing for this one young guy to have done that. They don't know, nobody knows his first name. There's a street named after him, like far out and like, the 11th.
First name.
Nobody knows his first name. It's a mystery.
Definitely the devil is involved in this. Good guesses, guys. All right. Keep it going. This king made a vow giving himself and his country to Our Lady. Which king was giving himself up to Notre Dame? He was holding out for the Notre Dame. I'm just going to let you out of this room because he's going to bark in a minute. But you guys know that. Which king made a vow giving himself and his country to Our Lady?
We're waiting for you, Carrie. We know you're going to get part of it. Not Napoleon. It was a king. Any guesses? Good, Carrie. Good. Louis.
All right, we got some Louis. You always throw in a Louis, you're probably halfway there. Referring to anything from these chats, it's definitely Louis always involved, some type of Louis.
We should do a chat that's just only Louis.
Oh gosh, that would be so hard.
Everybody would get part of it, right?
Look at this. You guys are, I like Cherry just saying Louis. I agree with Cherry. That's it. It was Louis the 13th, guys.
It was Louis the 13th. He was recovering from an illness. Back then, medicine wasn't that great. So I think probably every time you got the sneeze, maybe this is where man flu came from. They thought they were going to die. So he ended up recovering and, of course, being, living on. But he had decided he was going to present a offering to Notre Dame, saying that he was actually going to basically give the state, the country, and himself to Our Lady. So he wanted to create this vow, and he would, but it wouldn't take. He'd never get it accomplished. His son, Louis the 14th, had to actually take care of it. He ended up hiring Nicholas and Guillaume Gusteau, who created some statues. If you go to the very back of the church, it's a very small area, the back of the choir, that is reserved during the day for people coming to pray. It's not open for tourists to come in, except for one day I meddled myself way in there. But it's hidden back there. And so he had said he wanted to actually give a statue, Louis the 13th said, of the Virgin holding her son on his lap, which is a Pietà, which is in a lot of churches all over Italy and everywhere else, the Pietà. So his son, Louis the 14th, also added 2 statues onto the side. So that is the Pietà. It's at the very end of the church. There was a stunning photo right after the fire when they opened the door of these statues in perfect condition with just a mound of charred lumber in front of it.
Wow.
Which is very sad. On the left, you see Louis the 13th. He's it's kind of hard to see in there. He's actually offering a crown to her. And then, of course, the old Sun King, Louis the 14th, can't be left out of it. So he created a statue of himself as well, basically just looking at her adoringly and towards her. Maybe this one might be better to see the crown. You kind of see it a little bit better. Offering it. But like I said, it's usually closed. The church used to open at 7:45 in the morning. And I would go in there quite a few times right after it would open. One day, after being there 3 or 4 mornings in a row, one of the men, the sweet little men that go in there and clean it, kept seeing me. And I kind of kept always trying to like get in there so I could get up closer and take pictures and see the statues. And he one day saw me and he was like, Madame. And I was like, uh-oh, I'm busted. And he was like, come here. And then he was like, I see you here every morning. He goes, and I said, I'm a historian and an author, and I really, really just am dying to get in there and see those. Could I just for 1 minute? He goes, yes, okay. So he let me go in there.
Oh, that's so cool.
It was one of like the coolest moments.
Friends, when they see that you really respect what they're doing, they're really open to.
Yeah,
like,
I was so excited to be able to see it. In the floor, in the tile, there's a huge crest of the Bourbon family and Louis the 14th in front of it. It's really
so cool.
When you go and it's back open, go early in the morning. It's really great. You could have the whole place to yourself, which is just another feeling that's indescribable.
No one wants to get up early on vacation. All right, guys. Next question, except for Claudine, she gets up early on vacation. This author was inspired by David's grand painting, The Sacre de Napoleon, to write one of his most famous books. So this author was inspired by David's grand painting, The Sacre de Napoleon, and from that painting, he wrote one of his most famous books. Who do you think this author was, guys? He was looking at Sacre de Napoleon, a beautiful painting, and then he said, okay, I'm going to write this book. And he's very famous. I'm sure you know who he is.
Mm-hmm.
Not to give it away, but just, throw out any French author, really.
I'd love that, Cheryl. I'd love to go into. I'd take everybody into Notre Dame. I'd love to. You'd have to give me about 4 hours.
Bring some Red Bulls.
Yeah, bring packs of lunch. So we might be there for a while.
Claudine would
wait for that day.
History tour with in Paris. She just knows all the things. And you can get a discounted tour of Paris with Claudine on our Sunday walks now. $9.99, guys. Claudine gives all the history. It's amazing. It's not live. I mean, it's not in person. It is live on the internet, but
you're live. You're live in Paris.
You're live. I'm saying like actually physically here.
Oh, yes.
Close as we can get right now, right?
Yeah.
And you still get all your wonderful information while we're walking live around Paris.
Yes, it's nice to see it.
Guys, it's correct. It was a Victor Hugo. Roxanne and Kathy and Cheryl and Carrie, you guys all got it. It was Victor Hugo, Notre Dame de Paris.
Yeah, he had kind of been, throwing around this idea in his head to write a book about Notre Dame, partially because she was falling apart. And at one point, they actually thought about tearing it down. Could you even imagine? And then after David finished the Sacre de Notre Dame, or Sacre de Napoleon, they put it on display for a very short period of time. And Victor Hugo had seen it, and he kind of went home, and that was kind of basically what finished his idea of wanting to write the French version, Notre Dame de Paris. In America, you know that as the Hunchback of Notre Dame. But I like the Notre Dame de Paris, of course, the French version. But he went back there because he did that. That book became a big hit, and as most of you know, it ended up inspiring them to save the cathedral, and that's when Viollet-le-Duc got involved in. Because of that book, it basically saved the cathedral after the fire of April 15th last year. That book became a humongous bestseller, basically overnight, yet again. Here it is, it was published in 1831, the first version of it. He was on a tight timeline with his publisher. He asked for more time. They wouldn't give it to him. So he had it published in 1831. The next year in December of 1832, he published another edition that was longer, and it was also illustrated. I saw some of the original first edition books at this exhibit at the Petit Palais a year or two ago, and I could share those with you guys. I think I shared them on Instagram a long time ago, but it was pretty fascinating to see a first edition of Victor Hugo. But when the fire happened, it became a bestseller yet again, and all of the money from everywhere that book was sold went to Notre Dame.
I love it.
It's saving it again.
Yeah, they need to do that again. I think she needs some money right now.
Yes.
Release. New edition. All right, guys, let's keep going. We only have 3 questions left. We love hearing from you. So I think that maybe I could have even got this next question. Let's see if you guys can get it.
How to make it harder.
Oh, thanks. This American statue was inspired by the spire of Notre Dame. So this American statue was inspired by the spire of Notre Dame. That's a mouthful. Try to say that 3 times fast.
I didn't even notice I did that.
Inspired. It's an American statue, guys. There's not too many of those that are very famous and connected to France. Maybe I'm giving a lot away. And maybe I'm not giving anything away because America has a lot of statues and French culture is very much mixed into our culture without
That's
us
true.
knowing it a lot of the times. And I think, Claudine, you're going to have a lot of people asking for tours once we can all travel again.
I would love it.
Come on over.
There's a couple people, Catherine. I'd give Catherine some tours. I think there's a couple people I've given tours in here.
They know how great you are.
Roxanne kind of got a little tour when she was there at the same time as me before I was doing tours.
Hanging around. Where's Dawn? Dawn's not here.
Dawn and Carol are at their morning walk.
Oh, okay. I love that you know their schedule.
Well, they sent a message.
Like, you know what they're doing every hour.
We've had a lot of camera time today. You've had even more.
I've been up since 4 o'clock this morning. And 10 p.m. Everybody don't get a dog. The puppy woke
Does anybody have any guesses of this statue? It's in America? Has something to do with France?
Inspired by the spire of Notre Dame.
She might maybe stands a little like this.
Get away. Do you know? There's 3 of them in Paris. Is it
6? 6.
Oh my gosh, I'm missing a lot of them.
Maybe 7 if you want to count a really tiny one.
Oh wow, you gotta help me find the rest. All right, guys.
Carol, next time.
Thank you, Ellen. You saved us. The Statue of Liberty.
It was the Statue of Liberty. I thought that was going to be such an easy one. The Statue of Liberty, the internal structure was originally, Viollet-le-Duc was originally hired to do it. He ended up passing away, but the spire that he wanted to create for Notre Dame was much larger than the previous one. And Cheryl, you're the one who told me about the tiny one, I think. But he wanted to have this huge spire, and he had the idea of how he wanted it designed, but it was going to be very, very heavy. So he had to create this internal structure of the spire to hold it up. It had to have 4 big piers, basically, to also hold it up onto the church. And so while he was on the roof, that is where he got the idea of how the internal structure of the Statue of Liberty had to be created so that she could stand up. And he told Bartoli, who then, as we know, created the Statue of Liberty, which was actually supposed to be a gift for Egypt, and they didn't want it. And then he came around and thought, hey, so what everybody says, oh, it's this great gift that France was like, well, actually, before.
I thought that was so funny when I found that out. It was because it's really expensive to build the base to hold it, correct?
Yeah. And the original base that he actually wanted wasn't what was created that here in America. It was actually, he wanted like this basically to look like she was standing on a ship, and people could actually go underneath it and he was going to have these scenes, and then you'd have this view. There's a small version of it at one of the museum. Oh my gosh, what's the Arts and Métiers is where his original small copy is. There's two there. There's one inside, there's one outside. But it shows what the base was originally supposed to look like.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, that sounds like very expensive, building a ship to put the giant statue on top of.
Yeah, like the statue wasn't expensive enough already.
I like that we got Egypt's like second hand.
Yeah, it's supposed to be for the is it the Suez Canal? He wanted to give him for the Suez Canal.
They're like, we don't want this. Here you go, America.
So we got the leftover.
Secondhand gift. All right, guys. So this bell is the oldest bell in Notre Dame. It's named after Jesus and the wife of Louis XIV. This bell got named after Jesus and Louis XIV's wife.
Well, yeah. It's just remember it's Louis XIV.
I was gonna say, yeah. I think Jesus called dibs on that one, Louis, and it's kind of weird you named your wife after it. So.
Yeah.
You do you. So does anyone know the name of Louis XIV's wife? If you know the name of his wife, you will know the answer to this question. The oldest bell in Notre Dame, named after Jesus and the wife of Louis XIV.
And if anybody knows any of the names of the bells of Notre Dame, this is the one that they know.
Why?
Because it's the famous bell.
I remember when they replaced them, they brought them all down. You could.
They had them in the middle.
Yeah, and then they melted them all down, right?
Yeah, the very first one, this one, it's the largest one. It was first created in 1400.
1400. Whoa.
And they're up there. That was the big scare during the fire because they are in the tower, and inside the stone, it's all a wood lattice work that holds up the bells. So if the fire had got to there and burned that, it basically these huge these bells are tons and tons. They would have fallen down and probably destroyed the entire facade of the church.
Wow. So everything just worked out, besides the fire, but like the dust and the bells being taken down. Yeah. All right, guys. So Carrie, Cheryl, and Phyllis, Emmanuel is correct.
Yeah. See, my ladies know Krystal, Emmanuel,
and Marie Therese.
But it was recast again in 1430 after it was recreated in 1400. It was taken down again and recast yet again in 1686, and it was paid for by Louis XIV. So he paid for it. So he wanted it to be renamed Marie Therese after his wife. But nobody knows it as Marie Therese. Sorry, Louis. Everybody knows it as Emmanuel. It's really interesting. Of all the bells, each one of them have, obviously a different name. Many of them are, named after things from the Bible, but also different saints. And they all have a different tone. So every one of them is like a F flat or a D or something like that. So when they all ring together, but Emmanuel, the bells were all saved. Everything was fine. And after not Charles de Gaulle, I wasn't there for that. When, Jacques Chirac died last fall in Paris. It was the first time they rung them since the fire. And it was pretty amazing. You could hear it everywhere.
Yeah. You can feel the ground shaking. Of bells. I don't think I've ever actually been down there when they ring. That's interesting. I just feel the vibrations from the metro all the time.
Yeah.
The bells. All right, guys. So this is our last question. Thank you for hanging out with us. Let's see who gets it. This well-known architect of Notre Dame was also an artist. So who was a well-known architect of Notre Dame, but also an artist? What kind of art did he make, Claudine?
Painter.
He was a painter.
And I probably should have had this one earlier because I might have mentioned his name many times.
And this probably should have been your first question. I can see a number 1 next to this question, so maybe it just got mixed up in the preparations. We went from 14 to 1.
Yeah.
Any guess, guys? This architect of Notre Dame was also an artist. He was a painter. We've talked about him a lot during this trivia session.
It's not Cheryl's and my boyfriend, Philippe, the current one.
not Philippe. You guys won't have to fight for this one. You're safe, Philippe. I like that name. Good French name.
Mm-hmm.
Kathy says Violet Le Duc. Le Duc. Carrie, yes. Carrie, I hope you're teaching French history in school.
I know, she should. I think they're little kids, but they need some French history.
Do we even learn French history in public schools?
And she's in England. They probably learn more of it than we do.
Oh, I'm sure England learns. Yeah. I mean, you guys have a lot of beef with France. You've had a lot of things happen between the two of you. Cheryl, Kathy, Carrie, you guys are all correct.
It was our good buddy Viollet Le Duc. He was an artist, and he was also a self-taught architect. He, they wanted to send him to the École des Beaux-Arts, and he was like, nope, I don't want to go. His father and his uncle had also been architects. And so when he got a little bit older, he ended up going around with his uncle, who was one of the chief architects of the monuments of France. And so he would go around with him all over France, and he would do sketches and take notes. And he kind of just basically taught himself architecture. And he had a huge love of Gothic architecture. Everybody in his family did. So, when it kind of came time, he was given, he did Carcassonne. He did, of course, the Chapelle. He did that, and then after the Chapelle looked so beautiful, as everybody knows, he ended up he was one of the ones in the running to do Notre Dame. And of course, as we know, he ended up getting that job. But he was an artist. You could I've posted before when I've written about him, some of his paintings that he has done. His father was in charge of the king's buildings, the king's residence. And so he lived for a short time in the Palais des Tuileries. And he had done some paintings on some big, huge parties that were held there. But he ended up, becoming very well known over time. Some people, of course, didn't like some of the things he did. But he basically did all of the drawing. He drew everything. He drew all of the designs for them to recreate the kings of Judah, to do all of the windows, to do everything like that. Basically, if you went in there and you read the plaques for each of the chapel, it'll say stained glass window by from the drawings of Viollet Le Duc. I have this really cool book that's the designs and ornaments of Notre Dame. And this is done by him. This is everything. This is what he did. So there's one for each and every chapel of all of his drawings and everything. So what you still see there today on the walls is everything that he did.
Oh, wow, that's really cool.
Yeah. So he was a pretty master artist and self-taught. So, and of course he did the gargoyles. There were some gargoyles before, but he added some more of them. The grotesques, as they're called. There's the chimera, which is actually the ones that don't have the spouts. They're gargoyles when they have the spouts to bring water, and that's where the name comes from, because gargoyle. But this is one of my favorite family treasures. This is one of the little grotesques from Notre Dame, and it was purchased by my great aunts at Notre Dame, as my grandpa wrote on the bottom, in 1908.
Wow, that's cool.
And then later in the 70s, my grandpa bought one, and you could kind of see it. Wait, I'm on the other side, right over my shoulder on my wall. I didn't want to put this one on in case it fell off. But they purchased that. I have two of them. I don't even know if they make those. I should get one when I come back.
Yeah, 1908. Wow, that's a family heirloom.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us. As always, Claudine always has the best history and information for us, and we love chatting with you. Thank you for joining. And I think we're going to take a couple-week break from the trivia, but we are doing live virtual walks every Sunday now. So you can join us. Claudine gives you the history in real time as me and my husband walk around Paris with a camera pointing to things. We're your videographers. Claudine is Steven Spielberg, and I'm
the director.
I'm the cameraman, You're the director.
The producer.
So if you'd like to join us on one of our live walks around Paris while we give you history in real time, You can just check out the Vie Creative page or ClaudineHemingway.com. And we love hearing from you. Claudine, is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think we'll do the next one instead of 2 weeks, we'll do it in 4 weeks, just because there's Christmas weekend and then New Year's weekend. We thought it might be kind of hard to capture you, but everybody wants to see Paris live. Tomorrow's episode of the podcast is going to be about the Impressionist Mary Cassatt. So that's a really good one. She had a really great story.
Yeah, I'm excited to share that one. I mean, every woman is so fascinating. So tune in, Vie Creative, anywhere you can find a podcast. You just type Vie Creative, or even Google, and you'll find Paris History, Avec, Hemingway every Monday. Yes. And feel free to send us messages if you have questions for our live walk next week. We had some options. I'm kind of leaning more towards a Christmas one now, like
all right,
or Christmas lights, since it's like really.
We might have to make it a little bit later.
Yeah, we could actually make it later. You don't have to get up early to watch it, and we could do it with Christmas lights. Greta, thank you so much for joining our tour.
Thank you, Greta.
Chat. Greta, you're our cheerleader. You guys are all our cheerleaders. We love you.
I know. We love you. And thanks for spending so much time with us today. We appreciate it so much to listen to us rambling on.
I'm exhausted. I'm tired of listening to myself.
I know.
I'm going to go to bed now. Guys, thank you so much. And please keep in contact and just check on Vie Creative Facebook, or Claudine Hemingway, Blue Blonde Bruges Facebook as well, or ClaudineHemingway.com if you want any information about any of our events. And have a great
Sunday. See you soon, and have a wonderful holiday season, whatever you celebrate, and Happy New Year. But you could see us all many times in between then.
Or listen to our voices if you're not sick of them yet. All right, guys. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks, Phyllis. Thanks, Carrie.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Thank you.